If William Shakespeare were transported into the 21st century and given a YouTube account, he would likely simultaneously be horrified, obsessed, and incredibly prolific. As a master of theatrical, fast-paced storytelling intended for a diverse audience, Shakespeare would find in YouTube an unbound archive that mirrors his own, albeit with significantly lower literary standards. His literary standards would be lowered significantly. Indeed, what you're about to hear, is how Shakespeare would have perceived YouTube. He did his plays, his theatrical presentations, which he wrote, hundreds of, not hundreds, but many dozens of famous works, and they are still famous and quoted and performed all around the world today. But if this gentleman had YouTube and he was transported into this century, it would have been quite a change, because he was known for writing his plays and theatrical performances so that they catered to all types of audience members. That was great. He was prolific at that, and he did a tremendous job. By comparison, I like to point out what movies are like today, movies that we see in theaters and movies that from theaters that go out into streaming platforms. Those stink in my mind. They stink because those, for the vast majority of movies that are produced by Hollywood today, they try to cater to every kind of person in the audience. And they fail miserably at those cinematic productions that become boring and useless, and they're so difficult to watch. By contrast, Shakespeare was able to cater to what people called the groundlings in the audience. The groundlings were people that, sometimes they would stand up, throw fruit at the theater onto the stage, and they would demand certain kind of entertainment, and they were quite a rowdy bunch, the crowd, mostly in London, England at that time, in the early 1600s. That's right, the early 1600s. And those audiences in those days, think about it, the average person lived maybe, if they were lucky, 30, 35, 40 years. So the life expectancy of people at that time was very, very low. But and they did not live in sanitary conditions like we do today. And Shakespeare, of course, was well aware of that. So in his view, if he was writing and perceiving YouTube today, he would likely view the comments section as for the modern groundling crowd. The unfiltered feedback would feel familiar to him. All the people saying horrid things in the comment sections below his video presentations of theatrical productions that he would write for today's audiences. The people today would be just as mean and horrid in writing the comments for Shakespeare's productions as they were back then, because a lot of people, sad to say but true, they are trolls on the internet. They'll go to fantastic videos and say horrid, wretched things. Shakespeare would have wrapped that up in a little bowl, and he would have just loved that kind of thing, because he was a master at spinning it. So what Shakespeare would have done if he was alive today and having his performances performed on YouTube, he would likely go with them. He'd brace on to these horrid comments that people would write underneath his videos, and he would wrap them up in a little bow and perhaps use the negative feedback for comedic material in his community lab. That would be the community tab for his productions, and he would embrace the chaos of modern interactive spectatorship. He would just love the what was done, because he was a master, like I say, of those kind of things. And so, this is more than just what some people might punishingly call a to be or not to be situation. He just loved the audiences, and the audiences loved his work. They weren't all necessarily familiar with the gentleman named William Shakespeare, but boy, did they love his productions. And, as a content creator on YouTube right now, Shakespeare was working, he'd be working as a playwright and a shareholder. In his day, he worked as a playwright and a shareholder and an investor in these theater production companies. He understood that business is art, and he would have carried that over into today on YouTube, and he would see YouTube as a business. So for his content type, his channel would probably be called something like the Globe Vlog. The Globe Vlog, of course, a lot of his productions were in the Globe Theatre in London. He would call it the Globe Vlog or Will's Scenes. He would use YouTube, I believe, to post behind-the-scenes content of his actors, scenes like those promos that you see today for the big movies, but he'd do a better job at what we see today for the so-called big movies. He would film his actors practicing the scenes and retaking the scenes until the lines were crisp. He'd demand that the actors knew precisely what they were doing. And he would post these as best of, it's like you see the best of this, the best of that, the best of Rocky, the best of all these remakes of old movies. Hollywood is doing such a horrid job of, that's all they do. They don't have any creativity in Hollywood right now these days. That's from my personal opinion. So Shakespeare would just take all that garbage and blow it right back into our faces. He'd be having the time of his life. Of course, he'd be living a different life if he came here, but what the heck? And then he would be considering whether to use short videos or long form videos. There's not a controversy, but there's a different style that the various YouTube creators use today, whether or not to use short videos or long videos. He would probably create some shorts that like 60 seconds long that had high intensity soliloquies. The soliloquies where the actors would do asides, like whisper to the audience, well, wow, okay, And so he was a master at that, and he would use these short form videos for dramatic effect, slow-mo, filters, heavy on the aesthetic. Yeah, he would have played it for all it was worth. And of course, he had a reputation for being obsessive. He was very obsessed with what he did, and of course, he did it eloquently and wonderfully. And he had a reputation for investing in his own reputation. He was very concerned about how he was perceived by the public. So if he was running his own YouTube channel right now today, he'd probably be checking his analytics all the time, probably complaining that a vlog about the algorithm was buying his latest play, and he would take those things and he would just take it as the so-called cat in the pot video. He would kind of downplay any of videos that he did that didn't do so well. He'd blame the algorithm, and he'd call the algorithm something like, the God. He'd refer it to as some kind of a spiritual entity, so that he'd probably try to get away with that. In fact, as far as Shakespeare often dealt with themes of fate, jealousy, and surveillance. And among those productions that he did, famous for fate, jealousy, and surveillance, were Othello and Hamlet. Well, today, in today's society, that's even more prevalent than it ever was. Fate, jealousy, and surveillance. Well, we're being surveilled wherever we go. So he would have taken that, and wow, he would have taken these so-called closed-circuit TV cameras and had little clips of where the actors were doing on their way to the stage or after they got off of the stage. He would have taken that for all that it's worth. In fact, he probably would have used clickbait and hype more than most people are allowed to do on YouTube these days, and he would quickly learn the dramatic use of thumbnails and clickbait titles. He would just use it, and he'd just make us, some of us would be upset, but there would be nothing that we could do about what he's doing. He'd be like cramming it up our throats, the clickbait and the hype. For example, a video about Romeo and Juliet, he might do it titled "Secret Marriage Gone Wrong, Must Watch" with exclamation points. That's the kind of stuff that we see on YouTube these days, isn't it? So yeah, whatever you think about this, go ahead in the comments below, write whatever your comments are. And while you're at it, be sure to subscribe to my channel and click the like button as well. You want to see more of my videos about various things that relate to YouTube. Now, and Shakespeare, he would probably write a play about a villain these days. And I don't know who his villain would have been. It might have been George Clooney, who, in my opinion, George Clooney used to be a really good actor, but these days he's kind of wooden and stiff. That's just my personal opinion. And as far as his acting goes, and it's he's just maybe, I don't know, you might disagree with me. If you do, just put that down in the comment section. But I'm taking a lot of these so-called movie stars today. The list goes on and on and on, including Jennifer Aniston and Tom Hanks and those kind. Maybe some people refer to them, those particular, and I hate to name drop, maybe they're kind of like has-beens, I don't know. And that's kind of cruel for me to say. But when looking at those kind of things, maybe Shakespeare would do some kind of a play, and he'd do fake news and negative things on YouTube just to jam it down our throats, just to kind of irritate us, because he'd love to do that kind of thing. It provoked publicity in the minds of the viewers. It made them crave, and I think a lot of the viewers of some of his plays, they liked it when the big guys got, tempered down, and so that we didn't always address the so-called big fat cats in society. So if he did that, he'd call this comment section, when he would do videos about the horrible comments that people would write under his videos, and he would call that the commentator, and he would make it the commentator video, and it would be a series within his YouTube productions, the commentary tater. That would be something. I don't know how the heck he would pick his actors these days. It would kind of be a challenging situation in every regard, but he'd get through it, and he was able to adapt to certain kind of environments. So the purists would complain if Shakespeare came back these days, and they would say, well, he's not on a Shakespearean stage, he's doing videos, and whoa, it's not the old Shakespeare we know and love. Some people would be saying that. But when they say that, once again, Shakespeare would be cramming that kind of commentary, that kind of crap language right down our throats, because what he would be doing, he'd be doing virtual reality videos, and he'd be taking it to the max, 360-degree videos to allow the viewers to walk through the Globe Theater, for instance, or experience a storm scene in The Tempest. Yeah, that's right. And when this comes to mind, I think of that production at the Sphere, I think it's called, in Las Vegas, where currently, as of the time that I'm creating this video, at the Sphere is showing old classic 1939 Wizard of Oz movie, the actual movie, and it's just like a surround sound, and they put wind and special sound effects and make the viewers think, wow, I'm doing this, I'm right here. But he would do that, Shakespeare, to the max. It wouldn't be just like a place in Las Vegas, which people are not going to Las Vegas as much as they used to. That's for sure. But he would put these Sphere-like places, because he'd be so rich. He was one of the richest individuals in his days. He would be, creating sphere-like places all over the world. He'd put one in Tokyo, he'd put one in, play San Francisco, New York City, London, Paris, Rome, and people would potentially be able to go to these productions, and they would be on these large screens, and boy, Shakespeare would love that kind of thing. He'd thrive on it. He would love it. And actually, there are some people who would love this change, this new Shakespearean way. And then there's the old school folks, the people who teach Shakespeare in school and universities, or who give great instruction on Shakespeare when they're directing their thespians. And they wouldn't necessarily like that because they like the old way. And some people would, like I previously indicated, they'd be gravitating to the new way. In fact, his top video might be called something like Top 10 Deaths in My Plays. And he could do the top 10, because there's all these top 10 videos that you see oftentimes to increase viewership and the length of viewers. Top 10, my top 10 murders in my plays and blah, blah, blah. And so if he got 50 million subscribers, he would complain about it. He'd say there was something wrong with the algorithm. What in the heck is going on? Because he'd be way below guys like Mr. Beast, who have, what is it, something like 1 billion followers, something like that. Huge. Shakespeare wouldn't like that because Shakespeare liked to be on top. So, and then in the community post for Shakespeare's channel, he might say, this is my last place, is too long. Fools, he would say, the story dictates itself. It is not the device that dictates the story. And so it's more than just kissing by the book. It's more than just you kiss by the book. And it's more than to be or not to be. It's real life as we know it, as viewed and projected by the legendary William Shakespeare.